Today, man, I'm excited. I don't know about you, but today's a big one because we're actually talking about Adam's apples.
No, Kyle, we're not talking about Adam's apples. We're talking about how Adam ate the fruit, which, by the way, we don't know what it was.
Adam's apple.
And and how that is connected to Jesus as the second Adam.
Oh.
So, yeah, that's the topic. So,
okay.
So, hey, he's Kyle, and I'm Chris, and today we are the Bible guys.
All right, guys, I'm excited about today because, over the last few months, we've actually been getting into some Babylon Bee articles, which is completely satire. I just want to make sure everybody's...
We love our news.
This is important news. And we got a special one today, and it pertains well.
Let me just throw this in. I always say this. These are one of my favorite segments because it is really sophisticated humor, and because I live in church world, it's whoever writes this lives in church world. Right?
Yeah, and you'll like this one because this story is actually based in Akron, Ohio. So,
that's great. It's like 45 minutes from where I grew up.
Yeah. Right. So we're gonna read this, and it's actually fitting because we encourage people to get into Bible reading plans. We encourage people to read the Bible in a year, and so the title of today's article is "Local Man Crushing Bible in a Year Plan After Switching to Jesus Storybook Bible."
All right.
This is Akron, Ohio. Ever since changing over to the Jesus Storybook Bible, local man Dan Smith has been totally dominating his Bible in a Year plan. 3 chapters of Genesis? No problem, he says. Watch me knock this out in 30 seconds. This new Bible is incredible. After never making the 2-week mark in previous attempts to read the Bible in a year, Mr. Smith has thus far remained right on schedule. Then he says this, "My 5-year-old niece was kind enough to loan me her copy to get started, and it's been a total game changer," said Mr. Smith. "Honestly, I've never understood the stories so well in my entire life. Plus, the pictures are so good. They really keep me going." Mr. Smith has proudly posted his reading schedule on the refrigerator and crossed each day off once he's finished. "I am really proud of him sticking to this," said Miss Smith. "Some days, the readings are an entire page. I have had aspirations to do one of those plans, but honestly, I'm not sure I'm ready to take on the Jesus Storybook Bible in just 1 year. I'll probably start with," this is cheesy, she's saying, "I'll probably start with Babies Hug a Bible and see how that goes." Yeah. At publishing time, Mr. Smith had gotten so engrossed in one of the Old Testament stories that he accidentally read 3 weeks ahead of schedule.
That is so funny. So this is funny. This is funny because the Jesus Storybook Bible is a book made for kids.
Yeah. So actually, I want to give a plug to this.
Want to something funny?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's why this article is not funny to me at all.
Okay.
I was literally trying to figure out why is this funny.
Yes.
And it's because you have to. That article is only funny if you already know what the Jesus Storybook Bible. So to give a plug for the daily, because I do think we have obviously a lot of parents who watch this. If you have kids, let's say under the age of 10, great Bible to have, and even for adults. And here's the thing that's really cool about the Storybook Bible is it is like 1 page at a time, telling the stories from the Old Testament all the way through the New Testament. But the thing that's really cool about it that you would like a lot, I think, actually is, for one, the illustrations in it are incredible. But then also the way all the stories wrap up, is it connects to Jesus. So even thousands of years before Jesus, the way that each story ends, so talking about Esther, talking about David, all these crucial figures, it points to Jesus and sort of redeeming act that Jesus was to bring about. But I can understand now, because you haven't read it, that you're like, what the heck? I wasn't even laughing.
The Jesus Storybook Bible. Okay, well.
Yeah, so you really have to be immersed in church culture.
Church culture, yes.
Yeah.
So, but again, I would just throw a little plug out there for parents. Make sure to get that. It's actually a very, very good Bible.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
And you could read through it in a year, in probably a week. So
yeah, and you said, I love how you said, Chris, I think you'd really like it.
Yeah, I think you would. Great illustrations.
Because there's pictures.
The story is written so well.
Can you color it up?
Dude, I'm a huge fan.
And where was you at?
I'm a huge fan.
That's funny.
Oh, man.
That's great. Well, hey, today we're going to transition from there by saying this, that we would love for you to interact with us on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. If you're already receiving emails of our podcast, chances are that means you've already subscribed, right?
That's right.
So you're receiving those emails. But if you're not receiving emails, that means that you probably try to find us every week.
Yep.
You have to go to your whatever
podcast app or whatever it may be.
Yeah. But if you actually subscribe directly with us,
thebibleguys.com,
then it'll come from us to you.
Yeah,
which we would love.
It really
for you
easy.
to do.
You go on that website, you hit subscribe, and next thing you know, we'll be sending you daily emails. It's great.
Yep, that's great. So today we're talking about Romans chapter 5. We're completing the second half of the chapter. And in this particular case, we're not talking about Adam's apple, which, by the way, I think it's interesting how a medical term is called Adam's apple, and it's really based out of biblical stories.
Yes.
That Adam took a bite of the apple, which, by the way, it's always bothered me that, it wasn't an apple, right?
What?
Did you not know that? It actually says they ate of the fruit.
Yeah.
So for all we know, we're going to get to heaven. It's going to be the magical fruit that is unknown.
Oh.
It could be like, it's not a peach. It's not a pear. It's like a orange, prickly, hairy. Who knows?
Something really cool.
It could be something that we don't even know of.
That's true.
But it said ate of the fruit
of the tree.
It didn't say apple.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think that's interesting. So
if you do disagree with Chris, post in the. No, I'm just kidding. You're right though. Fruit of the tree.
You mean the Bible?
If you disagree with Chris, that it was a literal apple eaten however many thousands of years ago. Okay, here we go. Let's get into verse 12 right here. It says, when Adam sinned, sin entered the world. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone, for everyone sinned. Yes, people sinned even before the law was given, but it was not counted as sin because there was not yet any law to break. Still, everyone died from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even those who did not disobey an explicit commandment of God, as Adam did. Now Adam is a symbol, a representation of Christ, who is yet to come. But there is a great difference between Adam's sin and God's gracious gift. For the sin of this one man, Adam, brought death to many. But even greater is God's wonderful grace and his gift of forgiveness to many through this other man, Jesus Christ. And the result of God's gracious gift is very different from the result of that one man's sin. For Adam's sin led to condemnation, but God's free gift leads to our being made right with God, even though we are guilty of many sins. For the sin of this one man, Adam, caused death to rule over many, but even greater is God's wonderful grace and his gift of righteousness. For all who receive it will live in triumph over sin and death through this one man, Jesus Christ. Yes, Adam's one sin brings condemnation for everyone, but Christ's one act of righteousness brings a right relationship with God and a new life to everyone. So you see, Paul's repeating himself a bunch here. He's trying to make sure we get the point here. Because one person disobeyed God, many became sinners. But because one other person obeyed God, many will be made righteous. God's law was given so that all people could see how sinful they were. And I love that. It was given so people could see how sinful they were. But as people sinned more and more, God's wonderful grace became more abundant. So just as sin ruled over all people and brought them to death, now God's wonderful grace rules instead, giving us right standing with God and resulting in eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. So again, there's a lot of redundancies here, but I think it's for emphasis, right? I mean, Paul's saying this to emphasize these very important truths.
And we do the same thing when we talk today.
Yep.
So if I were to say, to you, man, you killed it. I mean, you just crushed it. You slayed it, dude. I'm telling you, it was so unbelievable. You were incredible.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing. So, and actually, it may seem redundant at times, but actually the nuances in his wording actually bring about just a slightly different aspect in some cases. Let's start at the beginning because it's this idea that Adam is he's the second Adam, right? Jesus is the second Adam. I love that. And by the way, he's referred to later on in some of Paul's writings as the second Adam. And I think that is so unbelievably cool. A lot of people don't realize that Jesus is called the second Adam.
Yeah.
And Paul is making the contrast. But let's keep in mind, though, too, let's remember the big picture. The reason why Paul is talking about Adam in this case, he'd already talked about Abraham, right?
Yep.
He'd already talked about the law. He'd already talked about Jesus. And so he's piecing all of this together. Well, the purpose of this is basically, here's what he's saying. He's saying, did you ever wonder? He doesn't explain himself, but we know what this means. He says, still, everyone died from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even those who do not disobey an explicit commandment of God, as Adam did. So, and he doesn't unpack that. Like, why did he say, let's talk about all the human beings that died from Abraham to Moses? And it's because, remember, we're talking about the law, and the law was given through Moses. So here's what he's saying. He's saying humanity started with Adam, and then Adam sinned, and then everybody became sinners. And he says, now, if you're so hype about the law and how you have to obey the law to get to heaven, he's saying, what happened to all the people who died before the law?
Yep.
That's what he's saying. He's saying there are literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, who knows, of people who died between that timeline. and what happened to them? And that's what he's saying. And so he's saying that, they're looking forward to, what Jesus is going to bring.
Yeah.
But everybody is given sin through Adam, and everybody's given righteousness through Jesus.
Yep.
And he says, just as one act brought this, one act brought that.
Yeah.
Just as one person led to this, one person leads to that.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah. And one of the things I always think of whenever when I'm explaining like even the gospel to other people, I always think of like word picture of like a bridge, right? Us being imperfect sinners. I think a lot of people, even those who aren't Christians, can wrap their head around the fact that they've missed the mark here and there, right? So we're imperfect. We have a perfect God. And then in this story, we have the example of Adam and Jesus being the bridge. And it's so important to have the bridge, like that link there, or else we're kind of hopeless. Have you ever been, like, I'm sure you probably visited, like, I know your daughter actually lives in the west side of Florida, but have you ever been to Sanibel Island by any chance?
No.
Okay, so it's beautiful, like Gulf side, beautiful island over there. And my wife and I were just there actually in August, just a few months back for our anniversary. So we stayed for a couple of days when we were down there in Sanibel Island. Beautiful, dude. Like it just like paradise. Not quite Hawaii, but it has that like just beautiful. A lot to look at. The scenery is amazing. All that stuff.
By the way, nothing's quite like Hawaii.
Right. Yeah. So but still, at least you're facing that same way with the sunset, sunrise, all that stuff. My wife and I, it was beautiful. Like loved our time there. Well, then the next month, that hurricane. I can't remember the name. Hurricane, whatever it was that came through there. September. Yep. So a hurricane hits. And going to Sanibel Island, the only way you can get onto Sanibel Island and exit or enter Sanibel Island is through these massive bridges. So one is in Naples, kind of around Naples area. One, the top of it's in St. Petersburg, or no, St. Thomas. St. Thomas, and as you know, the hurricane hit St. Thomas and did some damage there. And so it's pretty wild because like me and Kristen have pictures of us like and videos of us crossing over the bridge because it's just beautiful. I mean, you're surrounded by blue water and it's just amazing. And the crazy thing is when that hurricane hit, it actually knocked down the bridge on both sides. Like, so
wow.
People that owned homes, if you were somebody who was commuting in and out of work, there was no access over to your location. They had to take boats, and it's crazy. But it just made me think about like when I saw that, and I just thought about the fact that like that bridge is literally the link to that place, and now all of a sudden, as soon as you remove that link, you don't have access to that paradise. Really, it just made me feel for those people. But also when I think about our faith, Jesus is that link. He is that bridge between us and God, and therefore there's no condemnation in Christ. And we see this story, this bridge of Adam, who had sin in his life and kind of, took humanity going backwards. Ever since then, we're kind of moving east of Eden is what they say, right? Like from the beginning of time, humanity with Adam's sin, we've been moving, outside of Eden. And then Jesus comes to essentially right those wrongs. He essentially becomes the bridge between Adam, or he's making that bridge and also giving us a bridge between us and God. So anyways, I just love this. And I think if you are somebody who shares your faith or you're thinking about sharing your faith, think about that bridge illustration.
Yeah, and so let's remember that Paul, what he's trying to do is he's trying to take all of the Jewish readers and listeners, readers of his letter, right, listeners of the reading of it, trying to get all of their Bible knowledge, and he's trying to say, do you understand that my theology is supported by the scriptures that you love, and it's supported by the stories that you know and the characters that you revere, and do you understand that Jesus Christ aligns with every single Old Testament character? He aligns with Moses. He has his part with the law. He has his part with Abraham's promise. He has his part with King David and the Davidic covenant. He has his part with every single part of humanity. And not only that, but even our righteousness and how we respond to God through all of those phases and what that means for us right now. So he's bringing all of that together. And I love how when he talks about how the law was given to show us of our sin.
Yeah, I love that too. The verse 20 you're talking about?
Yeah, verse 20. For the law was given so that all the people could see how sinful they were. And it's so interesting because here we are, 2023, and if you ask somebody how to get to heaven, people who just don't know about the Bible, all they really know about the Bible is, well, I just know that there's a bunch of thou shalt and thou shalt nots in the Bible, right? And if we obey, then, God is pleased. And when we disobey or rebel or willfully sin, God is not pleased. So when you say, how do you get to heaven? People say, well, I try my very best to be a good person. I've tried really hard to obey the 10 Commandments. I remember I saw a message one time by Francis Chan, and since then I've quoted it like at least a dozen times, where he says, it's so funny how people hold up the 10 Commandments as like the highest bar. And they said, oh, the 10 commandments, you know, like never mind the 613 precepts, right? Yeah. The 10 commandments that are written on the stone. If I just keep the 10 commandments, he says the 10 commandments are the lowest common denominator of human behavior. He's like, think about it. He's like, try not to kill anybody today.
Yep.
And he's like,
Can you do that?
don't take things that don't belong to you.
Yes.
Right? You know, don't sleep with your neighbor's wife. Yep. Can you try not to do that today?
If you could,
right? And he says, instead of the 10 commandments being super high, he said, God has given them as super low. And they're the lowest bar, right? He says, and somehow humanity has managed to slither underneath them to show ourselves and to everybody else that we're not good enough. Yeah. I just think that is an incredible perspective. Yeah. Because after all, it's not Francis Chan who says that, it's the Bible. Because, you know, Paul says it right here. The law was given not so that you will understand how good you are or that you can obtain it. Right? And by the way, we didn't even mention the verse yesterday, but it says the easiest way not to break the law is for no law to be given.
That's right.
You know, when I saw that verse, you know what I actually thought? I'm going to quote a Bible verse to the next cop that pulls me over. Right? Hey, the easiest way not to break the law is for no law. If there was no law, I wouldn't have broken it.
Yeah.
You know, why'd you put that sign up here that says go 35 miles an hour?
It's true.
In a school zone.
Well, and it makes you think, I think even as like parenting, when you think about like the rules, like you could line up so many rules at your household to where like it's impossible to ever be innocent, right? As a child or in life, you know, you could go to a workplace and they could have all that. You show up at this time, you dress this way, whatever, and it's like it just feels like it's a futile effort because you'll never. And I think that's what is like the law is there to remind you how far away from perfect you are. You know, it's like you want to be perfect. No, you're not even close. And then even the way he follows up is like this is the good news of it, right? So hey, bad news, you'll never line up. The good news is. But as people have sinned more and more, God's wonderful grace becomes more and more abundant. So as you get further and further away, that just means his grace is stronger and stronger, which is a really beautiful contrast right there too.
So I told this like a year ago, but I'm gonna quick reference it again. One time, my father-in-law came in from Ohio, and he brought this big old Bobcat thing, you know, and he scraped my lawn, and we planted new lawn. And he threw down some seeds and some hay.
You do have good grass.
Yeah, thanks, man. And it turns out that the hay had like a grassy weed in it. Yeah. So there was all these weeds that came up, and they were so different than my grass. My grass was like dark green and small, and these weeds were like lime fluorescent green, and they were like 3 times as tall, and it was awful. And so I went in to the store, to the green store, and I said, I need and I pulled them, and I said, here, look at these. And I said, I need a weed killer. Now I went in thinking that I would be walking out with a weed killer. Yeah. And so if the weeds are a sin, right, and the law is the weed killer, right, I went in there thinking like, hey, just give me something to eradicate the unwanted weeds in my grass. He says, listen, that's a grassy weed, so anything I give you to kill the weed will kill your grass. He said, so you have 2 choices. Either start over and scrape everything else and replant. He said, or take this fertilizer and throw it down and make your grass grow taller. And the weeds will grow twice as quick. And what it's going to do is this fertilizer is going to make the weeds pronounced. And they're going to be twice as tall. And when they get to be twice as tall, then you can grab them and pull them by the root. He says, and then that way you get the whole thing. Well, I was on my hands and knees for 3 days.
Wow.
There were like, let me add up how many weeds there were. Let me think, carry the 2. There were 10 million weeds.
Wow. You pulled them by hand. Wow. That's impressive.
But my point is this, is I just remember thinking as I was on my hands and knees for 3 days, I was thinking, this is the law. People actually think that, you know, the law is going to squirt, eradicate all the unwanted weed sins in my life. But actually the law is not a weed killer. It's a fertilizer. It's a fertilizer.
That's good.
It pronounces our sin. It makes them.
Exposes it. Yep.
Exposing it. Yep. It spotlights the sin.
Yep.
That's what the law is meant to do. And so Paul is building his theological case, and he's saying, like, you understand that not only did Jesus give us righteousness, but the law never saved us. Yep. And then he basically ties it all the way back to Adam, and he says, Adam set it in motion. There's the problem. Jesus, by one man, has set the solution. It's poetry, is what it is.
Dude, that's good. That's a really good illustration there for that. So honestly, I think that's a great way. I mean, I feel like that's a great takeaway for that episode.
Yeah.
Just thinking about the fact that when we look at our sin and we look at our lives, we look at the mistakes we've made, we look at all those things, the fact that Jesus came and he filled the place, he filled the void that Adam had, and it's all about Jesus. It's about him paying the price for our sins and our mistakes.
Yeah, I would just say to our listeners, if you want to take something away, when it comes to the bad things in your life, all the sins that you want to eliminate, it's not about trying harder. It's not about like, oh, I need to obey, I need to be better, It's not about that. It's about saying, I don't have the power to be perfect, so therefore I'm going to pray
to the one.
I'm going to lean on God and ask him to give me the strength and the supernatural ability to change my heart, to change my desire, to change my actions, to change everything, the course of my life. And so it is actually not, trying harder. It's actually surrendering.
That's good.
So
that's a great takeaway.
Yep. So that's a good place to end. And we will see you hopefully tomorrow on The Bible Guys.
See you tomorrow.